All right. Well, good morning, everybody. This is Jomo Stewart et al. Here in the Fairbanks Economic Development Corporation. It is Tuesday, October 8th, right after 8:05 in the AM. And we are here for our latest Energy for All Alaska Task Force. A little off subject today, but as you all well know, as well as energy, we do public policy, resource development, just stuff that might be of interest to our community and state. And so our guest today is Miss Juli Lucky. Miss Juli is the campaign manager for the No on 2 campaign. But before that, she is a long time legislative staffer. I actually don't want to say how long, but it's done pretty much everything in the building, from front desk right up to chief of staff, both parties. So just a seasoned professional. And she's here to tell us about the No on 2. Well, ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
Okay, so as always, everybody, you all know the drill. I will be trying to monitor the chat box and as well as the participant list in case someone has a question or comment. They can put it in the chat. You can raise your hand, or really, again, she's done this before. Actually, as she was walking in, I had pulled up the presentation from March of 2022 when we were discussing as a state whether or not we might implement ranked choice voting. So here we are 2 years later as to whether or not we will retain it. But yes, if you have questions, if you have comments, this is for our all mutual benefit. You just go ahead and you can take yourself off mute and fire away. All right, well, Miss Lucky, without further ado, the floor is yours.
All right, so thanks, Jomo. As Jomo said, we met in the legislature, and I've been told this is compelling, although I'm a humble person most of the time. So I like to talk a little bit about why I came to No on 2 and in support of open primaries and ranked choice voting. And as Jomo said, I worked as a nonpartisan legislative aide for, a little over 20 years, not getting into the specifics. Worked for both sides. My favorite job, and I think Jomo's might have been as well, is committee aide. And that's because I got to bring everyone together and talk about things and hear amendments. And I always thought that my job was to make sure that legislators understood what they were voting on and that the public was able to get their testimony or anything out in front of people. And I remember there were nights on contentious bills that I'd be up till 2 a.m. docking all that public testimony in. But I say that not for a pat on the back, but because this has always been a passion of mine, is educating voters and making sure they're aware of what the issues are. Of course, on this issue, I have picked a side, but I am here to educate, to share whatever knowledge that I can share with the group here. So, any questions, any concerns, I will try honestly to answer them. But obviously, I am a firm No on 2 believer. I believe in open primaries and ranked choice voting. So I want to be clear about that up front. So do I just hit a button to get the slides and move? Or
Sure.
do you want me to? All right. I am best just talking to people, not doing slides, but apparently we always have to start with slides. So why vote no? So the reasons that I vote no: I believe that all voters should have a voice at every election. And I believe that candidates for office should earn broad support from the majority of all voters, not just a small group. And I like to start out with this because we get into a lot of details when we talk about open primaries, ranked choice voting, and election systems. And a lot of times people's eyes glaze over. So I don't want to, bury the lead here. These, I think, are the benefits of the system, is allowing every voter to have a voice on every candidate at every election, and then requiring candidates to earn broad support. All right. A lot of people say, Julie, why do we change this? And here's why I think we changed it. This is why I voted yes when open primaries and ranked choice voting were on the ballot. I'm going to take a little history lesson, try not to be too boring. 2019 session. I was there. I don't know if Jomo was there. We waited 31 days while the legislature gavelled in and did not pick a speaker and gavelled out. So they spent their session. They started late. We didn't approve a balanced budget or funding for permanent fund dividends. They spent 59 days in special sessions, and including one, if anybody remembers, where I think slightly less than half the legislators were in Wasilla, and a slightly more were in Juneau. And I can tell you, as a committee aide, if you can't get people in the same town, there's no way you're going to get them to agree on the bill. I mean, legally, they couldn't even do it. But this is how divided our legislature was in 2019. So legislators eventually compromised, and we had a funding plan with a $1,600 dividend, which made some people very angry. So what happened after that session? 2022 election. This is where people get primaried. So in a closed primary, somebody can come at you from either direction and they can say, we really didn't like that you worked across party lines to approve that PFD that we weren't excited about. And so therefore, what we're going to do is come at you in that primary election, because it's a smaller group of people voting, and it's people who are more partisan voting. So in 2020, you had Republicans, undeclared and nonpartisans could vote a Republican ballot. Any other party, undeclared, all parties could vote what they called I think we called it the combo ballot, but all the other candidates were on one. So these particular legislators were on that closed Republican primary. So what happened when voters came into the voting booth is, one, they had to pick, do I want to vote just for Republicans, or do I want a chance to vote for everybody else? So those people that picked that Republican ballot would then pick between the people on the Republican ballot. And so what we saw was 10 legislators were targeted, and you saw in the campaign literature, they said, you shouldn't work across party lines. You were elected to be Republicans. You should have been supporting the governor's agenda, all of those things. 10 legislators were targeted. 7 incumbents lost their jobs in that primary. So they lost to more extreme partisan newcomers, including 4 members of leadership. Races were decided in that lower turnout partisan primary, which means most voters didn't have their choices heard. So what happened is that small group of people that picked the Republican ballot chose for the rest of the electorate. As we know, most people come to vote in November. Very fewer people come to vote in August. And so what this closed primary did was it didn't allow the voters to say, hey, I like what you did, or I didn't like what you did. The majority of voters were left out of that conversation with their legislator.
At least on a first decision
right
basis.
Well, and then, so what happened was, of course, they didn't progress to that general election. So, and I have a little bit more numbers in. So this is an example, and I'm not saying one person should lose or one person should win. But in the 2020 election, Senator John Coghill served 22 years as a state legislator. He had not had a primary challenger since 2002. In 2020, Myers challenged Coghill, and he cited in press statements at the time that Coghill did not support that governor's agenda. And that's one of the reasons that he thought that he should be supporting more of that Republican agenda. So we had roughly, 3,000, got it written down, 3,549 voters were in the Republican primary, where Coghill lost by 14 votes when they did the recount. And then what did you have in the general election? 19,000 voters participated in November. And so those voters, the reason I like the system is that the open primary would have allowed Senator Coghill and Senator Myers to progress to that general election, and would have allowed the larger group of the electorate to say, hey, we actually were really incredibly upset about you working across party lines and approving that dividend. And so we agree with the primary voters that you should not be retained, right? Or they might have voted the other way. We don't know. And this is the thing about the open primary, is it allows a smaller group, 14 people basically decided who would appear on that general election ballot. So what happened in 2021? Oh, sorry, this should say 2021 session. Sorry, I messed up that. So the incoming legislature beat the record by 2 days or 3 days. They took 28 days to organize. But then what happened? A record-setting dysfunction. They spent roughly, there were 4 different special sessions. We came to the brink of a government shutdown. People were getting pink slips. People were getting worried because they couldn't pass a balanced budget or agree on long-term fiscal planning. And they were just so entrenched in, you need to do it this way or do it that way. So despite 4 special sessions costing more than 1.8 million in public funds, the issues remain largely unsolved. I think that brings us to, and so when people talk about why does ballot measure affect me, Julie? Like, why should I care? Because a lot of people, when you talk about election reform, they're like, I've got kids to pick up. I've got groceries to put on the table. I don't have time to think about your political games. And what I will say is, I don't see this as a partisan discussion. I see this as a policy discussion, because I think that if you're having legislators who meet in 2 different towns, if you're having people who won't come to the table and do what's in the best interest of the electorate, you're not going to get fiscal planning. You're not going to get energy planning, right? There's a lot of noise out there that keeps them from concentrating on what are the real issues. And I think that that's being accountable to that larger electorate means that more of their bosses are going to say, you should be concentrating on stuff that's important to me, right? And that's why I like the system. So 2022, open primaries and ranked choice voting were used for the first time. And what did we see? We saw more competition. So voters had, there were more candidates, but there was also increased political and racial diversity. So we saw more candidates of color, we saw more women running, we saw more moderates and extremists running, right? Because all of those folks could get a seat at that general election and appeal to that broad electorate. We saw the system work as intended. There's a very low error rate, and it allowed competition, as we said, at the general election while eliminating vote splitting. And so we have a good example of vote splitting. I don't know if you guys have one in Fairbanks, but I call it the Dustin Darden principle in Anchorage for those that are familiar. We have a guy that likes to run for office. He often gets, roughly 1,000 votes in any district, and he doesn't fit in one category. He's run as an AIP candidate, he's run as a Democrat. And so what we see in his district is 3 people run, and then you have whichever ideology he is running against, right? Okay, I don't know, did not explain that, sorry, did not have enough coffee. But basically, if he's on the conservative side, he's leaning, then he's taking away votes from that other conservative candidate.
So he's.
And so
okay.
then like the Democrat, thank you, John. So then we saw the more progressive candidate win. When he ran on the progressive side as a Democrat, he was splitting that vote with a Democrat, and we saw the conservative win.
So skewing.
And so he's skewing, but it's not that he's a serious candidate. He's taking, roughly 8 to 10% of the vote, but there's 8% to 10% of people that, for whatever reason, like this candidate. And so in the previous system, there would be maybe some pressure for that candidate to drop out. And in our system, the new system that we have now with ranked choice voting, because it allows that ranking, people can say, well, I really want to keep my vote for Dustin, but I know he's not very competitive. And so I'm going to rank this other candidate second, because if I couldn't have Dustin, I would rank this person. And so that's how the vote splitting is eliminated under ranked choice voting. And what we did see is there were only 3 elections that were kind of pushed over by ranked choice voting. It's 3 House seats. And that's what we saw was there was 2 Republicans and a Democrat, or 2 Democrats and a Republican, whichever side had the 2 candidates. When one was eliminated, that the 2 aligned candidates, that one ended up winning. Hopefully that made sense. And what did we see? I mean, I'm not going to say that this is a panacea, but we did see the incoming legislature organized quickly and adjourned. They had 1 day of special session, so they didn't get totally done on time. But what we saw in the press reports, and I put some of them up there, is people saying things like, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I knew standing around for 30 more days having the same arguments wasn't going to get us anywhere, that we needed to go ahead and get that balanced budget passed. All right, so this is the system. I'm almost done with the slides. This is what the system is. The system approved by voters in 2020 is 2 steps, nonpartisan open primary that allows every single voter in a district to get the same ballot. Everybody gets to vote on the ballot. This is very similar to the blanket primaries we had in place before 2000. A little interesting note is that Alaska has had some sort of blanket primary, open primary, one ballot primary longer than we haven't. The 2 times that the ballot was closed was actually due to court decisions, not due to what the people wanted. Every time people have had a chance to weigh in, they've always picked a primary that allows everybody to vote on everybody, as opposed to allowing a party to close it to certain people. And then the ranked choice voting general election. And that's where you get to, as always, pick your candidate. That's your first choice. And then you look at the remaining candidates and you say, hey, if my first choice wasn't on the ballot and it was a runoff between these folks, who would I choose? Rank those in order of preference. And that's basically the system. I like to answer questions because there's always a different amount of, so I think this might be, oh no, I have a couple more. Okay, these are the boring slides, sorry. But
I doubt it's boring. There's information, yes.
But yeah, I forgot I left in some stats, some numbers. So one of the things we hear is that, some people are confused by ranked choice voting. And what I will say is, anybody who lived through that 2022 election knows what confusing elections are, because we didn't even have the maps drawn out when we had a special election popped right on top of that first open primary ranked choice voting. So what we had was, instead of a ranked choice voting election happening in November, we had a ranked choice voting election happening on the backside of a regularly scheduled primary that had the same exact candidates on both sides one was for a remainder of a term, the one for the upcoming term. So of all of the things that could be confusing, I think there were a lot of factors that were confusing about 2022, but what did Alaskans do? Because I think Alaskans are smart. I think Division of Elections did an incredible job designing a ballot that was easy to navigate. We had 99.8, that is not a typo, of ballots cast were correctly filled out. So that you understand the numbers, 188, 600 something ballots were filled out, 352. So 352 out of more than 188,000 votes, right? 73 people ranked at least 2 candidates. So you saw the majority of people taking advantage of that ranking. It wasn't just that they didn't make a mistake with the bubbles, but they actually ranked at least 2 candidates.
They clearly understood the process.
I think so.
Yes.
So what did we see in the November election? Of course, in the August election, there was only one race, special election. So in the August election, we had 62 races up. Not all of them had a ranked choice component because some of them were only 2. We saw very similar, 99.9% of voters cast valid ballots across all the RCV eligible races. So just looking at those, we didn't want to tip the scales. In exit polling, 79% of voters said they found it to be simple. And here's where we see where I think is the proof is in the pudding. Voters showed they understood the power of ranking because more voters ranked when the races were competitive or when their first choice was not favored to win. And so what I'll bring out is Chris Bai. Chris Bai, Libertarian candidate for US representative. People like him, but I think that we all knew mathematically he probably wasn't going to make it to the top 2. And so while you saw an average of roughly 73% of the voters ranking 2 candidates, in Chris Bai's election, 82% of his voters ranked. So you could see those people saying, hey, I like this guy, but I know that he's probably not going to make it.
So I want to have number 2.
So I want to have a number 2.
Okay.
And then we can talk about like what were the other 20% of the voters? Because some people could have been saying Chris Bai or the highway, right? Some people could have been saying, this is my vote. And what we heard from a couple of poll workers in different areas is that people really understood because the machine will tell you, oh, did you want to rank? And they're like, no, that's the only person I want to vote for. So we did see people using ranking. We did see people choosing not to rank, but I think it's a voter's choice, right? And we saw a vast majority of people ranking. All right, few more slides with numbers.
We love this. We're wonky.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Yeah.
So I was told by everyone, take all these slides out. And I'm like, I don't even.
No. This audience, no one is bored.
So what did we see here? This is what I thought was interesting. 52% of voters split tickets, which means on the primary, they voted for one party in one race and one party in the other race.
Oh.
So this is where I think when I talk about the open primary, this is why I love the open primary. My district tends to be very liberal. The neighborhood I live in tends to be very liberal, but often at the top of the ticket, and I'm a nonpartisan, I'll be just very clear about that. The top of the ticket, we seem to have those, sometimes it's the conservative side that has the more competitive race. And what I always had to do was say, which race do I actually want to participate in? Do I want to participate in the one closer to home? And I had to make that choice as a nonpartisan voter. With this election system, I don't have to make that choice. And what we saw was the majority of Alaskans, 52% of voters chose to split that ticket in that first election. Empowers all voters to fully participate. So 60% of independent-minded voters that don't register with a party. So that's me, all of our undeclareds, all of our nonpartisan. But it's not just them. You might be a Republican that wants to every once in a while vote for the Democrat, or a Libertarian that wants to vote for the Republican. And that's the beauty of the open primary, is you get to choose from everybody. And that means everybody has to try to earn their vote, right? They can't just say, I'm only going to get the votes from this particular. As we discussed with the Conkle example, the system allows maximum competition at the election with more voter participation. So it's moving. I live in a district where the race was always decided at the primary, right? Mm-hmm. So when it got down to the general, I could pick the guy that they choose or the guy that the other people chose, right? And I didn't have a choice really most of the time because it would just be one candidate. And we see there's a lot of our districts that are like that, where you have a whole district that is politically aligned. And so maybe they always had a conservative or they always had a progressive. And what this allowed was 2 of those or 4 of those to move in some of the races we saw that. And so you could say, yeah, I'm definitely on this side of the aisle. But what I have now is a choice of 3 different flavors of that side of the aisle. Whereas before I would just get whoever the primary primary election pick for me. So what I like to say is voters are complex, and the system allows that to express that, because you can pick a Republican or a Democrat and independent on the same ballot. You can rank your choices. You can say, hey, I'm going to take a chance on my neighbor, even though he doesn't have name recognition. I'm going to show him that support. I'm going to express to the electorate that I agree with that platform. But with the instant runoff, I'm also not going to throw away my vote. I've been accused of that many times. Oh, Julie, don't vote for that person. You're throwing away your vote, right? And the system allows us to say, no, I'm gonna express, this is my, if I could choose, this would be the person I'd choose, but I'm not gonna sit out for that, runoff. I'm not gonna be threatened with that. All right, what's at risk of ballot measure 2? So ballot measure 2 would take away Alaskans' freedom to vote for the best candidate regardless of party. Take power away from the voters to hold their elected officials accountable. And when we talk about this, it's that gatekeeping of that primary. So if they're taking away your ability to weigh in on a candidate by narrowing those candidates that you were allowed to vote on in November, it takes away that power to hold them responsible, because in a closed primary, some of those people are not going to be able to take part in that election. And that may be the only election that your incumbent legislator is on. Gives political parties the power to exclude all nonpartisan undeclared voters. And as we said before, it's nearly 60% of all Alaska voters. So here I'll get into a little bit
No,
more.
but no one has done that. I mean, the Republican closed primary simply said, if you are a registered Democrat, you may not vote in the primary.
And
Or independent, you have to be Republican, right?
No,
No.
In the past.
no, under the system we had, I mean,
Okay,
again, it was a closed primary.
yes,
But it was really just closed to those who were partisan, those who had affirmatively registered with the Democrats.
And this
Okay.
is, and I want to be really clear about this, because there's a lot of different ways. We call it the open primary, but really ours is a nonpartisan primary. And we call it a closed primary, but really our law is what they call a party rule primary. So it is true that Republican ballot allowed undeclared and nonpartisans and did not allow voters of any party. The other ballot allowed anybody who wanted to, even Republicans could vote on that one. But how it is, and this is why this point is written
It
this
still had
way,
the same gatekeeping function.
but they did have the power, even under the old system, to exclude them by party bylaw. And so what this allows, it will allow them to close it by party bylaw should they wish to. And what we have seen, I don't like putting words in other people's mouths, but I like taking, if you said it, I'm going to take you at your word for it. And so we saw the person who did the most signatures, the person behind the signature gathering, Philip Izon, was, the powerhouse behind getting this ballot measure back on the ballot. And there's a recent article, we've seen tweets, we've seen him speak in public and say that he believes in the closed primary. He wants to see Republicans vote for Republicans. We see, and he's the person that wrote the law that allows this to happen. So I'm not saying that it will happen. I'm not saying that it won't happen. What I will say is that the law expressly gives the party to the power, or the power to the parties to exclude,
to decide
who's allowed to vote and who's allowed to be on that ballot. Yes.
Okay.
And so, and perfectly honest, as Jomo said, they have never, ever excluded nonpartisans and undeclared. This would just give them the power to do that. But they have made nonpartisan undeclareds have to choose which election we want to be in, which of course is one of the problems I have with closing down that primary. And revert to a system that rewards gridlock and punishes collaboration needed to meet Alaska's challenges. And that's why I bring up our recent history, is that that's the system we had. And people say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think a legislature that doesn't get to work for 30 days and meets in 2 different towns is broken. And so this is one idea, open primary, allowing voters to hold those folks accountable, allowing everybody to vote on one ballot, and then moving down to ranked choice voting is one way to do it. I think that should you maybe want to go for a regular runoff, right? Or are there things that you have around the fringes, is like, maybe we need to think about what the qualifications are for office, right? Or maybe we need to think about these other things. I would just encourage you to let's work and fix. No system is perfect, but throwing the system out after just one election, where we saw Alaskans knew how to use it, and where we saw a legislature kind of getting to work on time and working on their problems, we would lose all the progress that we have made. And I would prefer to move forward and say, what are parts about the system that maybe could be looked at, as opposed to saying, let's go back to party rule primaries and let's go back to first past the post elections, where somebody can win with probably 35 to 40% of the vote, as opposed to getting that broad support that you would get using ranked choice voting. I think that, oh, who's voting no on two? So here's some very, very small, sorry about that. I am not the artist. We have, I think 700 something individuals signed up to be, I will put my name up and be a public supporter. And then we have, this is a few of our kind of a bipartisan coalition of folks. And we just actually, you can see the Libertarian Party down there, the Alaska Independence Party actually just joined our ranks yesterday as supporting no one too. So we have, there are only 2 third parties in Alaska, and both of them support keeping the system. And I wouldn't call those, you know, I know a lot of people are concerned about putting the finger on, is it liberal? Is it conservative? Is it whatever you want to call it? And I would point out that the election results we got didn't really go one way or the other. It was pretty balanced. What we saw, at least coming into the state legislature, our statewide offices had conservative Republican, moderate Republican, and a Democrat elected. We saw a House come in, you know, pretty balanced, as has in the previous years. We saw Senate come in pretty balanced. So we have nonpartisan support. This is not, you know, one agenda or the other. This is giving voters the power. So you'll see League of Women Voters on there. As I said, the Libertarian Party, the Independence Party, both of our third parties. We have a lot of labor unions. We have a lot of Alaska Native. We have Sea Alaska, I don't know if Sea Alaska's on there, but AFN is supporting United Tribes of Bristol Bay. And I think the next one is just questions. Oh, here's, if you want to help, here's how to help. Sorry, I had to put that in. So I am here. That's it. That's what I've got. Happy to have discussions and answer hard questions.
All right, everybody. Well, we're there. So I would open up the floor to questions or comments. Again, you can just go ahead and pull yourself off of mute. I'll go ahead and get started. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball any more than anybody else, but as far as that allowability of being more exclusive in primaries, I could see it actually coming to pass. You know, the people who are, well, I can totally see it coming to pass. Again, we've now had a run where we kind of weakened the grip of party loyalists, and I could see them wanting that back.
And
Well, and wanting it more strongly.
And I just point out that some of the stuff that we've seen in support of ballot measure 2 specifically mentions closing primaries as the reason they want to support. And as I said, I'm not trying to put words in anyone's mouth, but I will take people at their word when they write an op-ed and said the reason that I think that you should vote yes is Republicans should only vote for Republicans and Democrats should only vote for Democrats. And that is why I'm voting no, is I think that Alaskans should pick the candidates and then Alaskans should pick their legislators, right? All voters. But I think that that's, Joe, you hit on the one, you know, big policy question is, do you believe that the party should choose the best Republican and the best Democrat and the best, in our case, AIP and the best Libertarian, and then a couple of independent candidates and those guys should go to the general, or do we open it up and allow the voters to say, here's the people we like the most and the four or however new running folks that earn that most support are the ones that we choose from in November.
Ms. Shepherd, I see you
Yes.
turned on your video.
Yes.
I am. I'm thinking about the nuances. I really like. Thank you, Julie,
Yes.
for laying this out. I really liked teasing out precisely what was happening in the 2019 election and how it relates to the efficacy of the session. I think that that's compelling for those who want an explanation. And I think that would be useful. I'm wondering about folks who generally are confused and simplifying. So first of all, I agree wholeheartedly with Jomo that the, diehard, longtime Republican, Reagan Republicans are going to be compelled by this message. So having said that, the folks who don't identify as such, who may be on board with voting against such a thing out of confusion. I like to think that the idea of having a simple explanation would help remedy that. It may not need to be even as detailed as what you laid out, but I found that to be a compelling reason that resonated. But I also really like what you did say about that Alaskans should pick, and that they are losing something. I think that's very effective for the general populace. So those are the two things that come to mind at this moment. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, in the end, Alaskans are going to pick. I mean, you have to be a resident. We're all residents, whether we have a political stripe or not. I think part of the question is how broad should that choice be? How early? This is interesting. Again, I took poli-sci in college. This injects a little bit of parliamentary flavor into what have been our, two-party winner-take-all, A or B system. The fact that you do have a broader, or it seems to be generating broader choices.
Gives a little more responsibility to the voters.
Well, I've seen lots of times where, I remember times voting under the old system where I had to choose a ballot. Where if I'd had everybody on one ballot, where I might have, I would prefer this person, but I'd be okay with this person. And they were of different parties, but I couldn't have that choice. I would have to see how things shook out in the primary to see if those people actually rose to the top, that I might be able to vote for either or, if that makes sense. Juliet?
Yeah, I'm gonna echo that, because that is something that, as an independent myself, experienced a number of times. I didn't appreciate the inability to, I should say, I didn't appreciate the obligation to vote a straight ticket. And I'll correct my previous statement, allowing for more voter expression and choice in the range of options. So yeah. I'll shut up now. Thank you.
Well, let's see.
I will, Jomo, if I can make a little plug on my, so while I do this no on two, when I came before, I was with Alaskans for Better Elections, and Alaskans for Better Elections is not involved in the campaign this year, but we continue to be a nonpartisan nonprofit for voter education. And so putting my voter education hat back on, if you have folks that are concerned about that ranked choice ballot, what I find is that just having that experience with it, we don't want voters to be disenfranchised because they are concerned, but I found that once people vote it, they seem to understand it. And so what I want to recommend to everyone is, if you have somebody in your family, in your group that is concerned, Division of Elections has a sample ballot for every district. And so I like to say voting is not a closed book test. You can take that sample ballot. They also have the OEP official election pamphlet, that little book on newsprint that should be sent to everybody. They have it on their website as well, although it's really big, so hopefully you get your physical copy. But if you have anybody that's concerned, you can download that ballot, you can hand them the ballot, they can fill it out in the comfort of their own home, they can pop it in their pocket, they can take that, they can take the OEP to the polling place and open it up. But I find that once they've navigated the ballot, once they've voted it, they kind of get it. And I would have people come to me when I did voter education and say, I've heard this is really confusing. And I'd say, I've heard that too. So I'm not even gonna tell you how to do it. Let's just sit down and do the ballot together. And they would invariably fill it out. We have taught, a lot of education for our students, and invariably they get it but I think that when people are expecting it to be confusing, that gets in our way. And so just people can become familiar with the ballot, go to Division of Elections, they've got a lot of great things on there, but like I said, that sample ballot is exactly what they're gonna see in that ballot box.
Now, I'll be honest. That first election, the early one, to fill the term.
Right.
The rest of Don Young's term, I was a bit confused.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it was just first time jitters. But I did have to kind of stand there and
take a moment.
Take a moment. But I feel like by the time I got to the general election, I had enough practice with it.
And the good news is, another thing is that if you don't fill it out correctly, you can ask for a new ballot. So they spoil your ballot, they put it into, and you can ask for a fresh one, and that's the one that you can put in. So I always like to tell people that as well, is be confident. Use your sample ballot ahead of time, but if you make a mistake, you can say, hey, can I get a new ballot? And they will, at the polling place, they will give you a new ballot.
That's a good bit of advice for my kids who won't send back bad food at a restaurant. It's like, why didn't you eat your dinner? It's, well, it's too salty. Well, why didn't you say something? Oh, I could never. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, well.
Yeah,
Ms. Baraf.
yeah, hi, yeah, thanks for mentioning the spoil ballots. I work as an election worker, and it was, yeah, it was a big, there were people who were confused, and I think the thing that we saw the most were folks who overvoted, with rejected ballots, and part of that too is just, they want, like, I really want this person, so I'm gonna fill in, I'm gonna rank them 1 through 4, which doesn't, that's gonna get rejected. But, or when there were, I can't remember which election it was, there were so many on the ballot that people had a hard time lining up rows and columns going across, and then they would inadvertently overvote. But yeah, you have up to 3 chances. So if you screw up a second time, you can get another spoiled, you could spoil 2 ballots and vote again. But what I've also been seeing, and I think a lot of the opposition to ranked choice voting comes from discomfort with something new, and then finding it confusing. And then also, from what I'm seeing in the few places I have seen, the comments, and Facebook is an ugly place to, try to gauge people's feelings, but it is a place to gauge them for those who engage with Facebook. But is that it is based on lack of knowledge and confusion. And to I don't know, I'm also bothered that after trying once to try to give it up, like, if it seems like you try for 5 years, and if it doesn't work, once people understand how to do this, then maybe you say it doesn't work. But after 1 year, it seems that most of the folks who are struggling with this don't actually understand how it works. And I have seen that some of the biggest arguments that I have seen, and I have, while trying not to engage on Facebook, I did so by actually putting facts from the elections division page. They have nice facts about how this works. I mean, you just put that on there. One of them is that people believe that they can't vote for just one person, that they're forced to vote for multiple people, and that their votes go to other people during the ranking process, and trying to convince them that no, your votes only go to who you vote for, and that you can vote for only one person if you choose not to rank. That's one thing I've seen people pretty upset about. And the other is that the top 3 contributors are from out of state. And, I don't know how you counter that, because it's true. But anyway, those, I think that it's a powerful tool, and I hope that as more, this doesn't pass, and that we have more opportunity to practice with this and gain familiarity with something that's new, and in its newness can be confusing.
Well, I will play devil's advocate, or the Clark. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I don't have to go before you. I'm glad I came. Clark Mill, and I'm nonpartisan and an election official. So I have a couple points of view to touch on, but I've been very pro, and am still very pro ranked choice voting. And you've given me even more reasons that I didn't realize. I absorbed and saw the complicated sessions, with lack of progress, but I really didn't strictly tie it. And I do now, and had in the back of my mind, this is about parties, party control instead of voter control. That's my opinion. It isn't exactly what you said. And I'll end up with just 2 questions, but yes, I wonder, let me make the firm statement that I definitely believe that as a nonpartisan, and I'm not an independent, I'm a nonpartisan, there's interestingly a difference. But I definitely have split my vote, to different parties, because I've always voted for an individual that I thought would be best for the service to the state or the borough, whatever it was, consistently. And I believe that's what ranked choice will deliver, is you get to vote for people. And let me mention that as an election official, I think it's been highly exaggerated that people were confused. I sat there and saw hundreds of voters in about half of the election day, because you're not asked to work, from morning till evening. I was there for half the time, saw half of the voters, and saw a dozen people out of 500, or actually, we have about 1,000 to 1,500 voters in my precinct. And that come through. I saw half of them, and we only explained to 4 or 5 people, and we did spoil ballots. There was only one person that spoiled 2 ballots, namely they had ended up making something where they tried to run it through the machine, and they said, no, you over voted, so, and they would correct it. It is not confusing. We do need, let's do at least 5 years or whatever. And I personally think that the elections of 22 proved the point and terrified the parties. Oh my gosh, the voters get to decide instead of the parties getting to decide who's going to be on the ballot. So 2 things that I wanted to touch on. Is there really proven difficulty, with the voters? Some individuals, but it's a very small proportion, I think. And then also, why is it that the primary contributors, donations, and I'm really glad it's on this slide and all the way through, yes, paid for, and these are the top folks that are, all listed outside. I haven't contributed to vote no, so maybe that's part of the problem. Anyway.
Well, I think that I'm going to be very honest about this. I believe that the 2-party system is very entrenched in our country.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the 2 parties have influence without spending any money. So if they say, hey, drop if you're not on top, they don't have to spend any money behind that message, because we already know. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that anybody doesn't know. I am not a partisan, so I've never run for office. I do not know this to be true by personal experience, but I know this to be true by talking to my friends, is they say, well, you won't have the party money behind you if you're not doing this. And so if the party says, we want this particular set of planks, platforms, and you need to adhere to this, then people say, okay, I'm going to do that. Not because they got a donation or not, but because they understand the power of what we have in place right now. And so I'll have to admit that as a nonpartisan, I'm not going to apologize for taking money from like-minded election reform folks from across the country. And it would be great if, we could, I think campaign finance reform is a discussion for a different day about how to make that all work. But what we have is a lot of misinformation out there. We have a lot of people, maybe, as you were saying, overblowing the confusion factor. We have a lot of people saying, oh, this is not one man, one vote, which is obviously the every support in the land has held up. This is one man, one vote. This is just like a runoff. You just fill out all of your runoffs at one time. So there is a lot of misinformation that we are fighting, and an entrenched system that we are fighting. And so there are groups that are fighting this across the country, and those are the groups that fund, various efforts. And if that helps get the word out as a nonpartisan, I think that when people look at it, there are concerns about that. But this is why I go back to, I believe that this reform is very Alaskan, because we have had open primaries more often than we haven't. And so I accept the criticism that our top contributors are out of state, but I reject the criticism that we are having a system foisted upon us that does not fit our culture and our electorate. And I will say that dark money means that you don't know who the contributors are, and we are very clear about who are. So we do have outside money, but we report.
And you said transparency is a different issue, but under that same election, wasn't there a transparency component, which is part of the reason why this is showing up?
The ranked choice.
Yes. So and I don't talk about this really with it gets really confusing because the last one was also a ballot measure too. When voters approved open primaries and ranked choice voting in 2020, there was a true source reporting requirement. And so what that required is that if you give to what they call an intermediary, so like you'll see there, these are not people's names, in candidate elections only. And I think that had to do with a single subject rule. I wasn't writing the bill at the time. But then you have to report who the actual contributors
Yeah.
to that intermediary is. So that's the true source reporting requirement. I think there's been some confusion because it cannot affect federal races. So that doesn't, so the majority of money you see coming in are on federal races. And so I think that there is some frustration that the true source requirements didn't go far enough. But this is what I'm saying, that campaign finance is probably a discussion for another day, because that would take up at least an hour of time about how to affect that change on the federal level. Because what you're seeing is gonna be a lot of federal ads, because that's a lot of the money that comes in, and that cannot be affected by state law.
Oh, devil's advocate?
Yeah, please. Both sides must be heard.
I can
Yes.
see the other side. Again, if, as a Republican, as a Democrat, as an AIP, again, as a party person, wanting to be able to select who is going to represent you. And you know, from your party perspective, I can understand that though too. And when I'm not wanting that diluted, you know, in every
Party can
election.
still speak, just the what? If they're not on the ballot, the person you'd like to vote for is not even on the ballot.
And actually,
the top four.
the party still can speak because it can still say,
Yes.
they can have their convention or whatever the
Yes.
district wide and make their endorsement of whom they think is the best representative
Right.
of the party's position, I suppose.
Right, and I don't mean to overblow it, but what Julie said at the beginning was, if you don't stand with the party, you won't be on the ballot. It, you know, the way it was. And that's, you don't get your choice. Let me vote for who I really want first, and then if it turns out I can't have Harvey or Marcia, then I'll have number two and number three maybe, and even number four. Then I still get to be informed instead of cut out where take him, her, or not, you're done.
And I'd push back, Jomo, and say, the thing is, parties do still get to, they can have a convention, they can say which person they want, they can put money behind that person, right? What they can't do is keep the other people from being a choice. Like, there's a difference between being able to advocate for the person that you want in front of the voters and being able to take people off the ballot so that the voters don't get to choose them. And what we did see is just the internal process this year, where there was no official, but there was pressure to have one candidate. And so that's what we ended up with in some of these races. What's interesting, and I do not like to impugn motives on anybody, but I will say what's interesting are the races where people didn't drop, and you can see who the front runner is and how close they came to that party position. So I think that when the front runner was very aligned, we saw, oh, you should drop out of the race, right? Let's limit that choice for the voters, because we want but when you have voters, districts where maybe the top vote getter was not necessarily aligned with that party, that's where you still see that inter-party competition.
Guys,
Yeah, pretty quiet.
very quiet. So we're nearing the top of the hour, but we do still have time. Inability to understand how it can be. Well, that was actually, that was one of my questions, but it seems to have gotten answered. How would you know you've spoiled your ballot? How would you know you hadn't filled it out properly? And you're saying the actual machines themselves.
Yes, let me
They
voice
won't
that.
just let you
Let
run
me
it
voice that,
through
and Lisa
you're
was
wasted.
an election worker as well, so I think she would validate. And sometimes the machine is coded to alert and not take the ballot yet. You know, if it's overvoted, you've, improperly done it. Well, always, if you've overvoted so that it can't work, it'll alert you. But sometimes if you don't vote for anyone in a particular race, so that's a different deal. You're allowed to do that, but is that what you intended?
It'll at least
And so the
highlight it
machine
for
will
you.
balk for a second and say, is this what you wanted? The election worker can walk up with the voter and look, and they'll say, the machine is saying you didn't vote for anyone on such and such a race. Is that what you intended? If the voter says yes, then they hit the button that says cast. In, done, no problem. It doesn't matter what you voted. It's, did you intend that? Same thing if you overvoted, then that won't go through. You won't have a vote. It won't take this result. And so do you just want to vote properly? They'll take the ballot, the voter tears up the ballot. We don't look at what we don't know or care what your vote is. You tear up the ballot, you put it in the envelope, just the spoiled ballot envelope, and we give you another ballot and you go do it. If it runs through, then that's what you wanted and you're a proper vote. You're a vote that was appropriate and successful.
So that's a very good point, because I think that is safeguards.
Yes.
Safeguards.
Yeah.
Safeguards.
Because let me use this as a chance to say, as an election worker, and there's these things about bad elections and problems or whatever, I think that's for Alaska and Fairbanks, that's baloney. For Alaska, because every election official in Alaska has the same training as me and whatever. I find it to be impossible to have a rigged election or some complication with election in Alaska. When you sign in, you certify that you will be honest and won't do anything. And when there's 8 other people in your election pool doing that, it can't be rigged. I mean, we've got good elections in Alaska, and I believe that's the case for the United States. And so.
But I think the comment is well taken in the sense that there is a feeling of, secured, like, voter security or election security is lax. And I will say, there was a good white paper, I think Division of Elections put out that, unfortunately, you can't get the people who are concerned about it to read the long white paper, but about all of the safeguards that are in place. But one of the fallacies that I hear a lot is, well, you don't know what happens with ranked choice voting. It's totally insecure because you can't hand count ranked choice voting because there's an algorithm. So I just want to be very clear. There is no algorithm. It is arithmetic. It is math. It is the math that you do 1 + 1 + 1. And I want to find this video if anybody ever finds this. They've been using ranked choice voting in Australia and in Ireland for a very long time. And I hear somewhere there's a video of little old ladies hand counting those ranked choice voting ballots. So ranked choice voting can be audited because we're still doing it on paper. It can be hand counted, and even in the Denny Wells recount, they actually hand counted a precinct. We don't have any video of that, but I know that it was done. And so the process with ranked choice voting doesn't make elections any more insecure, right? There's a lot of safeguards that were already in place that still apply to elections. And because we use that paper ballot, everything is auditable.
Exact point. All of it's on paper. There are no votes that are electronic in the mix somewhere. If there's a question, it can be checked and they can hand count. And we've done it occasionally in certain districts because it seemed necessary. Yeah, but it's all checkable. It's all real.
Well, and I know people that work in our elections.
Yeah,
Clark,
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
who I just
yes.
saw
Yeah,
at the
just,
primary.
and you'll see me in November.
And I'll
Yes.
see you in November. I know the
And you can
clerks
rely on me.
I
And
know the
and the
clerks
people that sit
at the
around.
borough and the city.
Yeah.
Whenever it's come up in social settings, I remind folks, yeah, I do know the clerks, and I dare you to go tell April Tricky that she's doing a slipshod job.
Yeah.
And not taking her job seriously on an absolutely nonpartisan basis. She wants to make sure that we citizens get to cast our votes and that those votes are counted.
Yeah.
And counted properly.
And what the voters decide is the way it should be. If I disagree with them, that's too bad,
And we often do. But that's our choice.
That's the way the system's supposed to work. Yep.
All right. Well, everybody, again, we are at the top of the hour. I see. Now, Luke, you had actually put your camera on for a hot minute.
Oh, he's there.
Mr. Mayor. Oh, you're still on mute.
Mute, he'll get it.
You're still on mute, Luke.
No, I think he's
Okay.
frozen.
All right.
He's in the gold stream, so our internet.
There it is, yes. That's something man, actually, I will lob this out. Yeah, again, we really do need to work on broadband, yo. I'm trying to figure out, I need somebody with much deeper pockets to throw some money at this so we could actually maybe move the needle. Okay, Well, everybody, again, that's the top of the hour. Thank you, Miss Lucky. Thank you very much for coming and at least giving us this presentation. Again, I know that we have people who disagree.
Yep.
I have Republican friends. I have Democratic friends. And the one, yeah, and I understand their position. You joined a club. Part of the way we do this is, you know, we kind of built a two-party system. And so you know, you've taken the time to join the club, you feel like you should be represented by somebody within the club and your choice. But I also see the other side. Again, we're all citizens here. We're just trying to and we need to people our government, because top to bottom, our government is people by people. Okay, well, you saw the I do have the presentation. I'll send out the recap here in just a day, in case you want the contacts. Otherwise, as always, again, I can tell you that as a Black man from Virginia whose family, yeah, I mean, I've seen the census record from 1800 where it actually says, it says freeman, which means that they were born free. But I've also seen the freedmen, which meant that they were born slaves. And it took a lot of work to make sure that the sires of that family would have the right. And so I take it very seriously.
Yep.
But yeah, everybody get out there and vote. Otherwise, just sit tight. I'm not sure what our next presentation will be. I'm lining them up. I think next week might be the one ASAP had done analysis of energy cost burden across the community. So I'm trying to set that one up. I've also reached out to Frank Richards at AGDC. They had a Wood Mackenzie report done relative to cost of gas for in-state consumers relative to different gas configurations, be it well, of course, he's leaning towards building of the in-state gas line. But again, they did a Wood Mackenzie report, and I'm trying to get a presentation on that as well. So I'll just watch your inboxes and look for the notices, and we'll see you soon at the Energy for All Alaska Task Force. And poor Luke is locked up. All right.
Hey, thanks, Julie. Hey.